the opening slide, and then we'll start from that point. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar organised by ourselves, CPA, Construction Plant Hire Association, to talk about the transition from red to white diesel. Thank you, everybody, for coming along today. Thank you especially to our guests from HM Revenue and Customs, Michael Little and Steve Clark, who very kindly joined us to help us understand exactly how the transition will take shape. So why is it that we are here today? Well, we're here because of the UK government's very broad scale policy to reduce carbon emissions in the UK economy to zero by 2050. One aspect of that is the removal of the right for construction machinery and construction industry to use red rebated diesel. The construction industry is not the only sector affected by this, but it's the one which we are all involved in. So it's important that machine owners, such as plant hire companies and contractors, understand what the change will actually mean for them, what practical steps they have to take beforehand and in the immediate aftermath of the change, and also how to work with their fuel suppliers to make sure that they're able to make a smooth and economically efficient transition. And that transition is 2 months away today, 1st of February to the 1st of April. So it's really important that we're able to come to terms with what those changes are. So my name is Kevin Minton. I'm Chief Executive of CPA. We have a running order today, and I'll briefly show you what that running order is. After this brief introduction from myself, I'll pass control to Chris Castley and David Smith from CPA, who'll be able to talk to you about the process that we've gone through so far, development of guidance. And then we'll hand over to a joint session with the representatives from Revenue and Customs, Steve Clark and Michael Little. These are our speakers here today, and we'll provide contact information for all of these people before the end of the event. So as is normally the case with this sort of event, please keep your mic on mute until such time as you want to make a contribution. It will be helpful for me and my colleagues whilst we're helping sort of marshal the questions, if you can either raise your hand using the normal Zoom. Sorry, no, this isn't Zoom, is it? This is Microsoft Teams, using the normal Teams function. Or if that's not working, just wave your hand and try to catch our eye. As is always the case with meetings organised by ourselves, we will be very careful to avoid anything which might infringe the requirements of the Competition Act, Enterprise Act and other things like that, which are intended to prevent us acting as a cartel in any way, looking like we might be acting in a way which is adversely affecting the free market. So there'll be some things which we will not be addressing today, such as prices and geographical territories and things like that. As I mentioned at the outset, this event is just one part of a whole series of programs of guidance, updates and other support for members and for the industry as a whole about the transition. We should be focusing very closely today on that transition process. We shall not be trying to make any changes to the overall government policy. That's not our purpose today. And also our purpose today isn't to talk about other greenhouse gas and other carbon reduction issues. Certainly a subject which is very close to red diesel, white diesel transition is the subject of HVO and other similar fuels. But I think it's probably worthwhile me clarifying right at the outset that the transition from rebated fuel to non-rebated fuel will apply equally to all forms of fuel, whatever their source is, whether they're a fossil fuel or whether they are biofuel or derived from other more renewable sources. The transition from the ability to use rebated fuel to not being able to use rebated fuel will apply to all of those equally. So we can stick quite closely to issues around the transition. And there certainly are a number of issues around that which we need to understand. We've had some questions come in, but before we answer those questions or turn to our guests from Revenue and Customs, I think unless there are any other elements of introduction which I need to make, I'm going to pass over to Chris Castley and David Smith now, who will talk us through where we've come to get to this point over the most recent couple of years. Chris, can I hand to you?
Many thanks. Yes. Hello, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. Basically, this is really sort of follow up, obviously, to the webinar we did in December last year. And I think, as Kevin says, we're now 2 months away from the changes coming fully into effect. So it made sense to really sort of update members, colleagues on what's happening, what the latest situation is, and obviously preparations and work that's ongoing over the coming 2 months or so. So looking back sort of at the process that we've been on before I hand over to David and HMRC, this has basically been, I think the first consultation happened on the future of red diesel by the Treasury back in 2018. So it was around about March 2018 in that budget whereby the Treasury first actually looked at this, and CPA at the time responded very robustly, it must be said, to the consultation process, highlighting the benefits that keeping the rebate provides to the industry. But I think it's fair to say we were put on notice at that point that they were going to look at this again and revisit this, and certainly by early 2020 we started getting soundings really around the future of the rebate and the process regarding red diesel. So we wrote to the Treasury ahead of that budget in 2020, warning them of the impact it would have on the industry, added costs, concerns around lack of business investment, issues around security, and the fact that actually at this point the industry had already taken massive steps when it came to lowering emissions through new, cleaner, greener technology, engine emissions, etc., as had been the journey for plant hire companies for about 25-30 years. Following the official notification in the March 2020 budget that there would be a consultation on the future of red diesel, we then, working with other trade associations, made representations to the Treasury. We had several meetings with them outlining again our concerns. These were initially planned to be face-to-face, but once the pandemic struck, we had to do everything remotely. We wrote quite a lot of letters and took part following consultation with members, and we did a member survey in the summer of 2020. We responded to the full consultation, I think, which was around the autumn of 2020 that year, and again sort of making the robust case for why the rebate should remain. At that point, actually, it was worth pointing out that the pandemic had actually impacted even further in terms of the fragility of the economy, not just the construction economy, but we felt that it was the wrong move and sent the wrong signal out at the time when the government were looking on one hand to build back better. That's when I think we first started hearing that phraseology, and yet on the other hand, we're going to start adding costs to the construction base. So we took part in that consultation. Unfortunately, then we had it really confirmed, I think it was later part of that year, or the early part of 2021, that they would be going ahead with the move to remove the rebate for red diesel, and ultimately force the industry to move to white diesel. Now, at that point, really, it became a case of, again, trying to set out our concerns, highlighting them. But I think it's fair to say, speaking with Treasury all the way through this process, their guiding mission has been they want to be seen that this is the greenest government ever. So this falls in line with a lot of the work the government have been doing around emissions, but also looking at a low carbon technology, low carbon future. And I think it's fair to say that's probably mirrored in the work they're doing around fossil fuels, petrol and diesel cars, and banning the selling of new cars by, I think, about 10, 15 years time or so. And that is very much their way of thinking. David, through his work with SITS, has done a lot of work around security, around plant theft, and the fact that we've repeatedly highlighted to them the challenge around the fact that, you know, removing red diesel will put plant machinery at heightened risk of theft. You know, the actual reason not to steal the fuel has been removed, but Treasury, and it's worth pointing this out, Treasury are the guiding department through this process. The Treasury have, if I'm being brutally honest, ignored the industry. Despite what we have said, what other trade associations have said all through this, what we've said through members, it has been, being frank, ignored. Now, we're at the point really where, as Kevin says, we've had to follow to the point where what guidance has been issued by HMRC and ultimately what preparations are going to be made by the industry to ensure that as smooth as possible the transition period can take place. So HMRC, I think, first issued their guidance, and I think it remains a current guidance, in about November last year. That came out, I think, about mid-November. We certainly emailed that onto members. Since then, we have worked to provide members with our own interpretation of that guidance. Now, this is very much obviously with a plant hire slant on this. We worked with HMRC. They approved the actual guidance, and that was published. We published it last week. I think it was sent out last Tuesday or Wednesday. And certainly, if you've not been able to see that guidance, then please do contact me, or please do have a look at the website. It's on the CPA website at the moment, and that provides, as best we can at this moment in time, an example of the actions that members should be taking. I think it's worth pointing out that at the moment, this is very much a first edition. We expect the situation to, excuse the pun, be fluid. We expect things to potentially change. We expect some areas and further clarification or interpretation of the new regulations and systems in place to develop as they come along. I mean, to paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld's unknown unknowns, there are some areas we probably actually don't know yet and can't answer some questions, but we do expect that we will produce over time, and certainly from April, once the new regulations come into effect, another edition for clarification. But I think it's worth as well reminding members that this is our version, but always as well refer to HMRC's published guidance. They are the ultimate arbiters on this. That is where the information is coming from. I'm going to hand over to David briefly, just to see if he wants to add anything further on the work that we've been doing these last 2 years or so.
Dear me, I'm muting myself. Thanks, Chris. I would echo everything that Chris has done. He's worked very hard on this to liaise with HM Treasury, HMRC, and it's nice that HMRC have come along today to answer your questions. What I would say is it's good to have them here, and at the moment I have nothing else to add. So I'll pass back to either you, Chris, or you, Kevin.
I think on that note, I'm going to hand back to Kevin.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, David. So just for the avoidance of doubt, I think I can get this correct. Here is the guidance which is currently available on the CPA website, and also the link to the guidance document on the website. As Chris pointed out, it's important to be ready to keep checking back, not just on our website, but on the Revenue and Customs Guidance website as well, or any other trade association that you happen to be a member of, because as we get closer to the transition date and as our thinking develops or new questions get asked and answered, then we will be continuously updating this guidance document. So I think then it's appropriate for me to pass over to our representatives, guests from Revenue and Customs. Michael and Steve, I'm looking for you on screen. Are you there, please?
We're here, yeah. Just start a very quick intro, and that's just to say thank you for setting the scene on it. This is a very big change to how we operate the rebated fuel system. We've moved away from just, it's not going to be a case of whether the vehicle's been used on the road or not. From in the future, it's going to be more complex. It's going to be certain vehicles, machines, vessels used in specific purposes, and the purposes are set out in the guidance. And unfortunately, that doesn't make life very easy for us this week. I think so far today, we've had to tell a zoo and also somebody running a small miniature railway that they're not able to use red diesel anymore. They asked us because they weren't in the guidance, and I think that's a very important thing to point out. If it's not in the guidance, that's probably because we don't want it. It's not because we haven't got round to mentioning it. I do think it's important, if you could, to have a look at the guidance and to see how that's going to impact you. Most of it's there. We are continuing to work on it. The changes that we're making are tweaks. They're not too highly what's the legislation or anything like that, who's affected by it, but it's trying to make it a bit clear. Some people, whether deliberate or accidental, have got confused about things like we mentioned some vehicles further on in our guidance, and they said, well, I can use this in all circumstances, and that's not what we said. So we're just trying to make things like that clear. But we'll start with the questions, because I think that's the most important bit, and I think getting into the detail is often something that you would probably find more of value than talking about the generalities of it. So we have a number of questions that were sent to us, and we'll just start off with the first ones, and they're asking about using up stocks of red diesel and returned machines with red diesel in them. So the first question was just about, is there an official transition period to run down stocks? And you also ask if tanks currently used for storing red diesel or to be switched to white diesel, have these to be flushed and cleaned prior to April 2020? It says, per current HMRC guidance, it states that this is required. Let's just start with the first part of that question about is there an official transition period? We've said that you should run down your fuel in advance, but we don't have a sort of set period, because we understand that people will run down the fuel supplies at different levels. Therefore, you could have somebody who will still have quite a lot of fuel quite close to the 1st of April, whereas somebody could be turning over the fuel in their tank every week.
Yeah, Michael, shall I come in there? I think the important thing to know is that you can't put any red diesel into a machine that's not allowed to use it after the 1st of April. So what we're saying is run down your storage as close as possible to nil before then, before you refill that tank with white in your storage tank. In the machine itself, any fuel that's already in the machine when the rules change can be used up. So from that point on, you'd need to top that up with white diesel. But that means that, of course, that we expect there'll be residual traces of red diesel, in machines for some time to come, in small levels, and we'd expect those, if we were to check the machine, if we checked it again, we'd expect it to go down further, and we'd be expecting you to be able to explain that that's like what we're terming a legacy trace relating to use before the rules changed. So you're not, as users, you're not required to flush machines or vehicles, and you're not required to flush storage tanks out, but you aren't expected to put any red diesel in after the 1st of April changes. So that's what you need to protect against. But like I say, our officers will be expecting to see residual traces of red. We're not doing the same usual sort of zero tolerance on trace levels of marker. If you're not flushing the tank out completely, you're not going to remove all those trace levels, so we'd expect to see that. But that needs to be consistent with having changed to using white diesel.
Yeah, next question was just about a machine returned to you with a tank of red diesel in it. I'm not really sure where the question was going. It wasn't that clear. You said we informed the customer that we are going to charge him to empty the tank, which might be, say, 25 litres. He is a farmer and says that he will come in and collect it, or that or he will need time to organise, collect, dispose of it. And you say, can we keep an amount of red diesel in a clearly marked quarantine area, clearly marked awaiting disposal, or do we not, or do not use?
I think you're absolutely right there, Michael. So one of the issues that many of our members have expressed is concerns over what they do with red diesel, which turns up in their yard after a rental has ended, and there's a variety of circumstances under which that might happen, and this is indeed one of them.
I think from our point of view, I can only reiterate the same rule, is that you can't use it in a machine that's not allowed to use it. If you've got a machine that can use it, then you can obviously use it in that machine and repurpose it that way. Alternatively, you'd need to sell it to somebody who's allowed to use it, or sell it to somebody who's allowed to deal in it, or dispose of it otherwise in an environmental way, which is it's not an area for HMRC to comment on, but there are waste recycling companies if it's a small quantity.
So perhaps could I just read that back, Steve, if I may. So just for the avoidance of doubt, if one of our members has got some red diesel in a storage tank, and there is good evidence to show that they're not intending to use this, then actually they're not committing any offence. It's putting it to use or putting it into a fuel tank, which is going to be in contravention of the requirements.
It's only an offence to hold red diesel if you're dealing in red diesel and you're not registered as an RDCO. So actually holding red diesel is not an offence in itself at all. It's only putting it into a machine that's not allowed to use it. So.
Okay, thank you.
So there's no time limit on disposing of that if you've got some around. Yeah, you can do that.
Very good, thank you.
And the third question then, currently all our machines are hired, including diesel. The customer is expected to return with diesel, or they will incur a charge for the diesel used. If the machines are hired for qualifying purposes post April 2022 with red diesel, have these machines to be cleaned, flushed before being hired again for non-qualifying purposes? I think the answer to that, just as if you're going to hire out a machine or vehicle for a non-qualifying purpose and it has red diesel in it, and well, you can't use it for that purpose, so you would have to flush it out. But there's ways of mitigating against that. You could, for example, have designated machines that only use rebated fuels and ones that only use white diesel.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, Michael, that we do appreciate this is one of the sort of areas where people have fallen into both camps. In the same way that in the past people who used tractors for agricultural use and non-agricultural use had the same problem, is that it qualified for one of the activities and not for the other. Now there are pieces of equipment that can be used for agriculture and therefore qualify, but predominantly I would say I probably use for construction and that sort of work, which doesn't qualify. So yes, it can use red while it's doing a qualified purpose, but it can't use red when it's doing a non-qualifying purpose, and it's the owner of that equipment's responsibility to make sure that you don't fall the wrong side of the law while you're using it for non-qualifying purposes. Now that might be, as Michael says, just not letting people use red diesel in it because that's the only way you protect it, or it may be that if it's an extended use of qualifying time, it's worth doing it that way and flushing out the tank between repurposing it back to a non-qualifying use. But it is an area the Treasury is aware of, been made aware of it by lots of stakeholders, but the intention of the retaining of red diesel used for agriculture and not for construction was specifically that. And one way they looked at doing that was just to simply allow the agricultural vehicles like tractors to continue to use red diesel. But the consultation pointed out that agriculture sometimes uses other machinery, like the special vehicles, like diggers, like other pieces of plant. And that's why it's been done this way, that the law's been crafted that while a piece of equipment is being used for agriculture, it can still use red. But that obviously does create this problem for a certain population who sit either side of that line. So, but that was, I think, as we had before with tractors, that's always likely to happen with this sort of thing.
Very good. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, we'll move on to, if there's no more questions on that subject, then using up stocks of red diesel return machines. Next questions were about working with suppliers, in particular RDCOs. So the first question was, are the RDCO requirements changing in any way?
Yeah, on that one, they're not changing in any way, because the key principle of an RDCO is that you are in a privileged position that we authorise you to deal in controlled oil on the condition that you supply it only to people with an entitlement to use it. So an RDCO still has that same key principle. All they need to do is, obviously, there are certain rules now that they need to be aware of to ensure that they only supply it that way. But actually, their responsibility isn't changing in any way at all.
All it's changing is that the people that can supply it to is reducing, but that makes it easier in a way, and that it should be easier for them to establish if the person is able to use it or not.
Yeah, there will also be a small population possibly of RDCOs who will no longer supply any red diesel to any customers, because they only supplied to agricultural customers before, and they can deregister and no longer have to be part of the scheme.
And the next question was, if we deregister it as an RDCO and make the decision to only provide white diesel in machines, but to replace the white diesel used with red diesel, as this machine was being used for a qualifying purpose, has this to be flushed out? And how do we dispose of the red diesel?
Yeah, I think we've covered that question in the previous ones.
Yeah, we sort of dealt with it, and I think that probably we should make the common sense point that if you're hiring somebody out a machine and you've filled it with white diesel and they come back with rebated fuel, that rebated fuel will have cost them less to put back in. So you should make sure that they don't do that. And it will also mean that you'll have to flush out the machine. So you want to take steps to ensure that they don't do that. Any other questions on that section then, or shall we move to the next?
I think, hi Michael, it's Chris, if you can hear me. Yeah, I think Kevin's just had to been ejected by MS Teams, so apologies about that. But no, if you've got any other questions on that section, then please go ahead. But I think what we might do straight after that is open it up to the floor, because I think we've had one hand go up already.
Yes.
So yeah, just going to go through a couple more around that, and then we'll open it up to attendees, if that makes sense. Cheers, Michael.
Okay. Next section is using generators. So you've asked regarding standby machines. We may have boom lifts on contract hire on a construction site, along with standby generators where a full tank of red diesel is in the machine, perhaps for the last 2 years for emergency use. And you've asked, is this to be flushed out and replaced prior to April 2020? And if not, can this be used post April 2022? If the generator is on a commercial construction site?
Yeah, okay. On that one, any fuel that you held before the 10th of June, before the 11th of June, in fact, up to and including the 10th of June, you can use up rebated fuel. I'm talking about. You can reuse it up after the 1st of April, as long as it's for that standby generation. If you obtained it for that reason and you're using it for that reason, you can use that fuel up. So in a way, that quantity is ring fenced, that you can still use it without payment of any extra duty and without fear of any being in breach of the law, because the law that's just going through the statutory instruments will specify that that is actually legal use of the fuel, only for that date though.
Yeah, so just to pick up, it's not allowed because it's on a commercial construction site. It's because it's fuel that you bought before that date in June 2021, and it's for an emergency use. No other questions? Then on to cross-border issues in Northern Ireland using green diesel and adding blue dye to fuel tanks. So you've asked, what happens if a machine is hired in the Republic of Ireland and is returned to Northern Ireland with the green diesel still in it? Does this have to be flushed out? And how is the green diesel to be disposed of?
Okay. I mean, fuel obtained legally in another jurisdiction it may be brought back in the machine and used up while it's in the machine. Again, the law will say that's not illegal. What you would, again, you might need to specify in your terms and conditions of the hire what fuel they can put into a machine if you don't want fuel coming back with green diesel in it, because at some point you might be asked to prove that's the case of where that was obtained. But yeah, at the moment, well, not at the moment, it's a current thing under the law. It's not changing that vehicles or machines that come back with fuel legitimately fueled under the Istanbul Convention are allowed to use that up.
Yeah, and that's in the engine, but what you can't do is you can't bring some green diesel up with you and add that to the machine.
Yeah, and you can't decant it either from that machine for use elsewhere. So those would then be offences.
Is it just also worth, I suppose, reinforcing, picking up on that point there, Steve, that you made, that if you've had a machine, because we know that a lot of our members actually do have machinery hired out across the EU as well. So there's quite a lot of stuff that is going out and coming back in, certainly cranes, but a lot of stuff is out on long-term hire. Is it worth reinforcing that point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it comes back with red diesel in it, as long as you can show that it's been filled up in an EU country, then that red diesel can be used in the UK. In construction, as long as you can prove it.
Just correct that to mark diesel, of course, because red diesel is a UK marker, so it won't have our UK markers in it. So we should be able to identify it on that basis anyway, because it won't have Accutrace in it, which is our covert sort of DNA type marker, and it won't have our dye markers, which is the yellow and the red markers that give it the red diesel the orangey colour that it gets. It will have the yellow marker in because that's the Euro marker. So we should expect to see fuel markers consistent with where you're saying it's come from and been fueled up. So yeah, again, it's a case of keeping good records, I think. So if we ask questions, you're ready to answer them. That's
okay. And you also asked, can you add a blue dye to a fuel tank to act as a deterrent to theft? Okay,
so I mentioned this to Chris yesterday on the call. I think if you remember your school education about primary colours, if you mix yellow with blue, you get green. So if you use a blue dye, fuel is sort of a yellowy straw colour. You're going to get a green-looking result, which is going to then look to our officers like you're using Republic of Ireland green diesel, and probably going to mean that they're going to test it on that basis. So yes, you can add a blue dye to white diesel. Nothing wrong with adding any markers as long as they're not the rebated fuel markers. You can add whatever you want to your own duty paid fuel, but you just need to be aware of what that might then give it the appearance of, that it's just going to cause inconvenience to you when we test it, and obviously to us as well if we're testing fuel because we have a suspicion it may be rebated fuel. So be careful on that way. We can't comment on the effectiveness of covert or other markers as a deterrent effect anyway. So and I think it was mentioned at the start that the risk of increased risk of theft has been mentioned, but it's a question for the Home Office more likely, I would think.
Great stuff. Thank you, Steve. Was there anything else Michael, because I'm keen. We've got about, I think we've scheduled for about 25 minutes or so. So I'm keen to obviously open it up to the floor as well.
We've got two more questions. Well, I think it's three actually, but we can skip through these. So another question was: is the construction of buildings on a farm non-qualifying, i.e. white diesel, must be used? And again, that's back to, if you look at the guidance, we don't say building. It's not agriculture, it's construction. So yes, you have to use white diesel on that. And the final question was just about companies who operate rail plant, i.e. machinery that has wheels that allows it to run on a railway. They'll be allowed to continue to use red diesel after 1st of April, but does that extend the machinery that might be engaged in supporting rail infrastructure or development work, but does not run on rails? So what you're talking about there is just things that aren't on the rails themselves, just on wheels and on the road. And again, the answer to that is it has to be things that are on the rails. It can't be just vehicles with tires that can be used on the road. So they have to be fixed to the rails to get that ability to use.
Just an extension of that as well. It has to be a vehicle or a machine that's designed to run on a railway. So it's a railway in the definition within. I can't remember what the act is, but it's the Railways Act of 1960 something. We can dig that out. But it's talking about proper what you would recognise as a railway. So it's not narrow gauge things like you might find on a mine shaft or a kids railway at the garden centre. It's not that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think we also had a question, well, a series of questions, but we can answer it very briefly. Somebody's asked about using fuel to do stevedoring work on a port, and again, it's not in the guidance, it's not in the legislation. You can't use it for that purpose after 1st of April.
Yeah, just to go back to the construction on the farm sort of question, the current law has that tractors and the like can be used for purposes relating to agriculture. Our notice 75 sets out what we mean by purposes relating to agriculture, what we accept as being those purposes. None of those are changing, so we're not changing our definition of agriculture. It's going to be the same as it is now, and the new law will also use the same phrase, purposes relating to agriculture. So we are replacing the notice 75 probably at the beginning of March. We'll have two running in parallel for a short time. The current notice is called fuel for use in vehicles, so you can look it up and you can see what we mean by purposes relating to agriculture. The new notice is going to be called fuel for use in vehicles and other machines, so it's only a simple change in the title. So even if you Google fuel for use in vehicles, then you'll still find it. But there will be two versions running parallel to it, just to explain that, as Michael said at the beginning, the concept is moving away from only vehicles, road vehicles versus everything else, to qualifying vehicles versus non-qualifying vehicles and machines.
We've now finished all the questions we got in advance, so if there's anybody who's got any further ones, we're happy to take those.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, let's hand over. Graham Harwood. Yeah, you had a question. What I'd ask people to do, if they can put their hand up first, and then I'll unmute yourselves once we've had the question done. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Over to you, Graham.
So we talked about units being returned containing red fuel. In practice, when it comes back in June, it's likely to be mixed fuel. As a supplier, how do we determine that fuel is too red and needs to be drained off and can't be resupplied, or we can simply top the tank up with white?
It's a good question, Graham, but I'm afraid that there's no easy answer to it, because our analyzers will pick up traces of red down to quite low levels. Or sorry, when I say red, I mean the rebated fuel markers down to low levels. I think if you see a colour of red in it, or a pinkish colour, you know it's going to be, that's going to trigger our detectors. certainly. You'd be looking at flushing it out to the point where the levels are very low. As I said before, we for a good while to come, because the government has said that you don't need to flush out machines when you change from qualifying to non-qualifying, we know that we're going to see low levels of trace markers. So we're not going to be active. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for people who haven't changed to using white. So again, it sounds like an awkward message, but it is, in fact, it's a concession that's being made, because probably as HMRC we would have preferred it if it was a clear-cut zero tolerance. If it's got a trace in, it's illegal after the date, and we would have probably wanted flushing out of tanks. But you know, we understand why the government has said no to that, because they don't want to put people onto unnecessary, undue burdens, and that's fair enough. So we've had to adapt. We'll have to adapt our methods from the current way, where if we detect traces of marker in a machine that's not allowed to use it, we'll seize it. We're going to be doing things differently, in that we will disregard low levels of marker. But what we might do, if we find somebody's equipment has got low levels of marker in, we might go back a month later to see that that's gone down, and consistent with using white constantly. So we are going to take this pragmatic light touch approach. We're looking for people who haven't switched. We're not looking for people who've done their very best to switch and have still got some traces of red. So
okay, thank you.
I think is Quattro plant?
Yes, got a question.
Next.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. Yeah, Quattro plant. If you could unmute yourself and put your question in, that'd be great. We've also had a couple come in over messages as well, so I'll address those afterwards.
Yeah. If you want to feed them to us, yeah,
that'd be great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Bob Browning here from Quattro Plant. Question centering around. I've got two questions actually. Centering around, first one, road sweeper with a donkey engine. In its road sweeping mode, can it be still using red diesel?
again back.
No, I think
It's back to
that one.
Back to the guidance. It's not in there.
It'd have to be using for agricultural use.
Okay, thank you. I thought, I must admit, we thought we'd read in the guidance that it was accepted, so I'm a bit surprised.
It's not in there.
Okay, fine. We'll try and dig that bit out. The other bit is the rail-borne plant. We have plant that goes on the Croydon tramway, which is actually full-size railway. Yeah, I do know the guidance accepts tramways and makes it not able to be used. I find that a bit surprising when it's actually ex-network railway that it's running on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid that's a question for Treasury about things that have and haven't been included. The law is saying that things that run on a railway. So they were looking at trains. Yeah, you've got something that runs on a tramway. I think you should look at the definition of what a railway is in that law. If it fits that, then you'll be able to use it. I think while we're just on railway things, I can see in the chat there's a question about machines and vehicles that can do both really. The law says if it's designed to run on a railway, it's exempt. So as long as it's designed to run on a railway, and we mean properly, and it doesn't mean you just drive it on a railway. It means it must be designed to do that. So it's going to have those sort of flanged wheels that trains, no tyres, that sort of thing, that run on actually on the rails. There's nothing in it that says it has to be solely designed to run on a railway. So hopefully that answers that question.
And you have a question from Linda asking, with it being for UK to look greener, please explain what the difference is from using white rather than rebated when the difference to the CO2 is the dye.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think you want to do that one, Michael?
Yeah. The answer is it's the extra revenue that's been charged on it. Treasury look at this in terms of what the impact of how much carbon's produced, and therefore they're trying to equal things in terms of saying there's a cost to producing that carbon, and at the minute rebated fuel has a lower duty rate, but by increasing it, they're saying it makes it more attractive to people to use less of it and think of alternative ways of powering vehicles in the future and machines.
I think in terms of the actual emissions from a litre of red versus a litre of white, there's no difference. But that sort of misses the policy. That's not the policy of this. Is not to put you onto a greener fuel in terms of diesel. It's to put you on fuel that isn't diesel as quickly as possible. So that's the policy that Treasury are adopting, is that they want people to, want to incentivize development and progression to different fuel types as quickly as possible. As I say, that's a question for them to answer if you have disagreement with that.
Great. Cheers, Michael. Thank you, Steve. Can we go to Dave McAteer? He's got his hand up.
Brilliant.
Dave, over to you.
Great, thanks. I just wanted a definition of flush. Steve, you said when a machine comes back with red, it's full up with red, we have to flush it. Do you mean drain it or flush it?
Yeah, I mean, if you have to flush it, we mean flush it. We mean actually take the necessary steps to flush it out. But that only applies to RDCOs who are repurposing a tank from red to white. So we're talking about empty your tank, so drain it out, take as much fuel out of it, the red fuel as you can, and we accept then there will be residual traces of red in that tank when you refill it with white. But over time, we'd expect those to diminish and eventually go away. So that's the approach we'll be taking for a good while to come yet, because different machines use fuel at different rates. So some machines aren't used as frequently as others. So sometimes people have asked us, over what period are you going to have a leniency period for? Is it 6 months? Is it 3 months? We can't answer that, because we will be working with the owners to say, show us your records, show us you've been using white diesel, tell us that you drain the tank, and we'll be working on that basis. Because if you can satisfy us that fuel traces that are there relate to fuel that was in the tank before the rules changed, that won't be a case of us being pragmatic or saying we decide not to seize it. The law will say that's legal, so it won't be illegal to use to have those traces in.
Okay, great. So thank you. We haven't got a question, actually. It might be for David Smith, but I'm just going to go back to one that came in a little earlier. If your company is registered as agricultural, we can carry on.
Again, this is just back to what we've said.
It comes down to purpose of use, doesn't it?
Yeah. Is it a vehicle that's allowed to use the fuel, and has it been used for an allowed purpose? So if it's a tractor that's been used for agriculture, that's fine. If it's a tractor been used to build some houses, then no.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is farmers can misuse red diesel as well for things that aren't agricultural. Yeah. So it's not the user, it's the use and a combination of the machine type and the use it's being put to that is exempt. So it doesn't matter who is driving a tractor for agricultural purposes, whether it's me or whether it's a farmer, as long as it's the purpose that qualifies. And as I said, notice 75 is where you'll find all of the interpretation of that.
Great stuff. Thank you. Cheers, Mark. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to go to Martin Frost. Got a question. This is one really for you, actually, David. Will the CPA look at amending its own terms and conditions to protect members from our customers returning machines with the wrong fuel in?
Thanks, Chris. Hi, Martin. We've already covered it in the model conditions, the 2021 conditions. Because we were aware of the impending changes with the switch from red to white diesel, we've modified clause 28A of the model conditions, and that's the clause I would always suggest to all members to look at to remind their customers what could happen if they use the wrong fuel for a piece of machinery supplied to them. So look at that clause. And one of the things I would always say is certainly start now and start talking to all your customers and explain to them, if they are not aware of it already, what the forthcoming change will be from the 1st of April. Explain to them that fuel, a machine filled with red diesel on or before 31st of March can run on red diesel. And as the guys from Revenue and Customs have said, after that date, it switches to white post 1st of April. But if there is any problems, clause 28A is what you need to look at.
Right. Here's David. Thank you. Michael, Steve, we've got a question in, just to be absolutely clear on this one around road rail vehicles, from Stephen Kirby. It says, to be absolutely clear, a road rail vehicle that runs on road and rails with hydraulic machine. Sorry about this, it's gone off my screen. Here we go. Hydraulic bogies can run on the road with red diesel.
Steve has just snuck in the answer to that one.
Has he just put that one in?
I'm putting that chat, yeah. So the law simply says a machine or a vehicle designed and constructed to run on a railway is an accepted vehicle. There's no other qualification for it. So as long as it's designed and constructed to run on a railway, that says designed and constructed, not adapted though. So you can't do like the Top Gear guys did and make your own vehicles out of Jaguar XJS or something like that. It needs to be a purpose-built railway vehicle. So
great, cheers, thank you for that, Steve. Any other questions from people in the audience? We've not got any more come up on the messages, but put your hand up, please. We've got about another 5-10 minutes or so to go. So are there any other questions? Graham, over to you again.
So just in terms of what we can do with the units. So let's say we have a hire going out on the 15th of April. Are we allowed to fill that hire unit up to and including the 31st of March before it goes out? Just to clarify.
Yeah. Any fuel that was in the machine before the cutover is allowed to be used up. So if you I suppose you can work it out for yourself, but if you've got any sense, if you brim the tank at 1 minute to midnight on the 31st of March with red, you can use that up, but you just can't put any more in from midnight onwards. So.
Perfect, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Graham. Thank you, Steve. Got a question from the forestry sector. Can you clarify how the forestry sector are to move forward? We work both on construction estates, landowners, farms, etc. sites do not have multiple machines that can be set aside for different fuel types.
Well, you can use rebated fuel for agriculture, horticulture, fish farming and forestry. You can't use it for construction, and if you're going to go and do construction work, then you are going to have to flush out your tank and put white diesel in it. And I don't see if that's necessarily that unfair. What construction company won't be able to use red diesel? Why should you?
Great stuff. Thank you for that, Michael. We got any other more questions from the audience on the screen? I can't see any more hands up, but so this is your chance. We will hopefully be running another webinar reasonably soon, but any more right now? David.
On mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, guys. Just as a question, because one of the things that's been sort of cropping up is this issue of dual use, where you've got a machine that, if it's used for qualifying purposes for red diesel, can run on red diesel if it's being used for forestry, agriculture, etc. What if a machine was supplied with white diesel in it, but it was being used for forestry or agricultural purposes? Is there some way that, rather than having to flush out the tank from red to white, instead being run on white, is there any way that, for example, the rebate or the difference between the cost of red diesel against the cost of white diesel could be claimed back from Revenue and Customs in any shape or form, or anything like that, just as an alternative?
There isn't a provision for that, David. I mean, it's a question we get asked quite a lot, or Treasury get asked it quite a lot as well. I mean, you could widen that out to say, why doesn't everybody use white diesel and the qualifying users claim it back? I think it's just a case of the main use still that that HMRC is looking for evasion in is road use, and it's much easier for us to pick out the road use is illegal when it's got the markers in it. And so the preferred method so far, some countries, other countries do it the way you're suggesting, and they do give a rebate to a qualifying sector based on invoices and that sort of thing. But it's not something that I think the government is considering at the moment.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot.
Great one. We've got just time for a couple more here. I've got one here about, do the changes affect kerosene use, e.g. heaters in workshops and vehicles?
No changes to kerosene.
No changes to that at all. Okay. I will just go through a last few couple. I'm keen that so we're coming up to time. If you store white diesel, can you sell it on, or do you have to be licensed?
Does that mean white diesel, or does it mean?
You mean red?
It says white, but I don't know. Does it, Alison? Are you there? Can you clarify what you mean, white or red? White.
If you store white diesel, you can, from our point of view, you can sell it on, but I think you have to be licensed by a local authority to sell petrol and diesel, to sell fuel. But you wouldn't need to be an RDCO in our terms, because that's only applies to controlled oils, which are the rebated ones.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. Mark Dolan asked a question. I'm not expecting you guys from HMRC to answer this one, but Mark said, how much additional tax revenue is anticipated being raised? That question, Mark, it was, I think, talked about in a Westminster Hall debate a couple of weeks ago, where Helen Whately, who's the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, spoke about it. I think it was around about, I might be wrong here, I can check it. I think they were talking about 500 million. Was talked about as tax revenue, but I don't think they're going to sort of publicly look at that and say that's how much they're getting. I don't think it will be ring fenced in any way at all. I think this will go to general treasury pot.
There is a fund. I have to hold my hands up and say I don't know much about it, but there is a fund that Treasury have for development of newer technology, and I can't remember how much has been put into that.
Yeah,
so it's things like hydrogen, etc.
I think they've put a couple of, I think it's 2 billion or something for a future. I think this is Bayes working with Treasury on doing something around future fuels technology. Certainly David and I have been took part in a few workshops where they're looking at electric vehicles and they're looking at hydrogen power. Without wishing to go revisit old areas of argument, our whole point all along has been that technology is clearly technology for the future. However, we are at a point at the moment where it's not actually commercially on the available in large numbers or efficient numbers. If we're being really honest here, you know, the industry is still going to be using diesel for quite a while. So I don't think, Mark, in answer to your question, some of that money might go to that, but I don't know if there's a clear line in terms of the money raised from the duty being paid will go that way. David, you got a hand up, right?
No, I was just gonna while we've still got a minute or two left, Dave McAteer just threw another question. If I answer the second part of that question, and then Chris might want to answer the first bit, anywhere of commercial available safe fuel marker, there's things called Venom, which a company called DataTag have actually have available. That would certainly be one company that you could approach. There's probably others out there that you might want to have a look at to start using, and then start putting stickers on the side of your machines and other fuel stores to actually say that this is one of a number of measures that you as a company will be adopting to protect your fuel stores, so deter potential theft anyway. That's one thing. I'm not sure if we're going to be actually, CPA are going to be producing an actual template letter, but Chris has done a lot of hard work with the Q&A document that's been circulated, and I would certainly suggest that that is the first thing that you should send out to your customers to make them aware of its contents, which is a very useful guide just to make them aware, because certainly I've heard that a tier 1 contractor has mistakenly believed that or have suggested that they will not accept any machinery with any red diesel on it from the 1st of April, which is incorrect. As long as it can, as Steve has mentioned, as long as it can be shown that the machine was filled with red diesel on or before 31st of March, it's fine. So it's just ensuring that message is circulated far and wide.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth, with the guidance, we're encouraging, certainly share it as much as you can with clients, with customers, so that they're aware. I know the Civil Engineering Contractors Association as well, CECA, they're looking, we have worked with them actually quite closely on this, and no doubt we'll have further discussions with them over the coming weeks to make sure that from their side, their members are fully aware of what happens from the 1st of April onwards. You know, a situation where someone inadvertently puts red into a piece of kit, you know, we need to make it absolutely clear that, you know, when the machinery is handed over, these are, you know, the new regulations that come into effect, and to make sure that their members are aware of that as well. Linda, I'm sort of keen that it's 3 o'clock now, so we're going to wrap up. But your query there about site security and what happens to vehicles. Obviously, I think we've been talking about this. Certainly, David has been looking at this in terms of, you know, CCTV, looking at on-site security, making sure, trying the best that you can when machinery is left on sites over the weekends, after work hours, etc., to try and, you know, make sure that A, it's secure, but also it's visible. You've got the up-to-date security systems in place to try and stop people from obviously taking fuel from the tanks. David, is there anything you want to sort of add to that?
I think it's just reminding the customer it's their responsibility for site security, and one of the dangers is not only to the damage to the machines trying to take the fuel, but also the fuel theft itself, and possibly any environmental issues with fuel spillages whilst it's being stolen. So it is a case of just trying to tell the customer that they need to rethink their whole current setup for security. But if you want to certainly email me, my email address, for those that don't know it, it's david.smith@cpa.uk.net. I'm happy to sort of field questions. Chris can remind everyone of his email address afterwards, and we can deal with questions. And equally, just very quickly, is any questions that we haven't got round to, please resend them to either Chris or myself, and we can forward them on to the guys at Revenue and Customs to get their input as well. Back to you, Chris.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, David. Yeah, I see we're obviously getting a few questions in on the side now. I'm afraid we are going to have to wrap up, but my email address is chris@cpa.uk.net. We will be making this recording available, I think, reasonably soon. So we will put it on the CPA website. Before I say goodbye, Michael, Steve, is there anything else you sort of want to just sort of quickly clarify? Or
I've just tried to knock out a couple of answers, so I've rushed them. If there's anything that we need to come back to, we will do. You can take it up with us separately, and we can send around the clear answers later. Yeah,
absolutely. No, that makes sense. Thank you, Michael. Please do keep an eye on any further updates. Please have a look at the guidance and FAQs that we've set up on the CPA webpage. Again, this isn't the definitive one. This is edition 1. If you have other queries or questions that we've not thought of, please do send them in, because we can add them on there and then spread obviously the message to other members, and also making sure that you get it out to your clients and customers as well. So as I say, please keep an eye on that. Further developments that happen that we become aware of, we will obviously let all members know in due course. But otherwise, thank you everyone for attending. Apologies from Kevin Minton. His broadband went down right at the inopportune moment, and it's probably best that I sign off now, because my 8-year-old is probably coming home from school. And thank you. Have a good rest of the day. Bye bye.
Okay.
Bye.